Then on Sports Central, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the big matchup coming up here in the Big Ten in Week 8 of this 2022 college football season. And this could be over the Minnesota Golden Gophers and the Penn State Nittany Lions. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 8. You got Minnesota, who's 4-2 on the season. This team has taken 2 straight losses after starting out the season 4-0, but this is a great opportunity to get back on the right track as they take on Penn State, who took their first loss of the season last week. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, starting with your team trends. Minnesota took a loss to Illinois last week, 14-26. Turns out Illinois is the top team in the Big Ten West right now. We would have expected that in the offseason. Illinois is emerging as a surprise team of the season, but Minnesota, they took a loss there, and they're 4-2 on the season. That puts them at 1-2 in conference right now, so that's obviously not where you want to be, but once again, the Big Ten West is wide open right now, so that's a division that honestly could be won by a team with 2 to 3 wins right now. But then you got Penn State, took a loss to Michigan, 17-41 was the final score there, losing to the 5th-ranked team in the country. So obviously a tough loss for Penn State, disappointing one for sure, but I mean this team is still in contention with only one loss to make a run at a really good bowl game this season. They're also ranked 16th in the country heading into this matchup. Games be on Saturday, October 22nd in University Park, Pennsylvania. So Penn State is the home team for this one. And it's a nighttime kickoff as well. This is prime time in Penn State. So they've got a good home field advantage here. And they're favored by 4.5 as well. Over-under is 44.5. And your FPI is going Penn State, 62.5%. So Nittany Lions are favored by a small margin for this matchup as expected. Series history, Penn State leads at 9-6. Minnesota won the last matchup. Of course, you might remember that one when Minnesota was a huge surprise team in 2019, and they were ranked pretty highly after that win over Penn State. That game was in 2019, so just a couple of years ago, but we don't really see these two teams face each other all that often, considering it makes sense with Penn State being in a separate division than Minnesota. Stat comparison for this one, Minnesota is 56th in points per game this season, 4th in points allowed. They are 109th in pass yards a game, 17th in rush yards a game, and then for yards allowed, they are 5th in passing, 29th in rushing. So this is an outstanding team defensively that we've seen so far this season out of Minnesota. And surprisingly enough, or whether it surprises you or not, this team is allowing 11 points a game. That is an average. I mean, this team has been outstanding on defense this season so far. So that's obviously something to keep in mind. You're heading into this matchup is that Minnesota has shown tremendous promise on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, I mean, they've been good in the rushing game. Of course, I mean, the only time that this team plays well is if they have Mo Abraham, who is their outstanding running back with nearly 700 yards on the season and 9 touchdowns. By the way, he's been injured. He hasn't played every game this season. I mean, so it's huge to have him for this team. I mean, Abraham is such an outstanding running back, and I feel like Minnesota even last season, I mean, it really sucks that they lost him so early on in the season, because I feel like Minnesota would have been a big contender even last year if they had him the entire year. But he's an outstanding running back, and he is tough to stop. So that's something to keep in mind here for Penn State. But their passing game could be better for sure. I mean, Tanner Morgan is the starting quarterback who did get injured last week, so something to keep in mind there. But I mean, it hasn't been a terrible start to the season for him. Kind of underwhelming, 1,100 yards. 7 touchdowns, and has thrown 5 picks so far. As for Penn State, 42nd in points per game, 15th in points allowed. They are 69th in pass yards a game, 30th in rush yards. Then for yards allowed, 70th in passing, 51st in rushing. So a pretty good defensive team here in Penn State as well. Both defenses are definitely better than the offenses, you could say. And I mean, Penn State is a team that is a bit more balanced on offense, but they are slightly better in the rushing game, with Singleton being their top rusher so far this season with nearly 500 yards and 5 touchdowns on the season. Of course, you got experienced quarterback Sean Clifford. Both teams have got experienced quarterbacks here. Tanner Morgan's been around for a while, same with Sean Clifford. So that's something to keep in mind here, is that both teams have got some good experience. But obviously, both teams have been more promising on defense so far this season. And statistically, Sean Clifford has been a better quarterback versus Tanner Morgan. Recent matchups, Minnesota, they lost to Illinois 14-26. Of course, they also lost to Purdue 10-20, so 2 straight losses here for Minnesota heading into this matchup. But before that, I mean, when this team beat Michigan State 34-7 on the road, I felt like Minnesota was for real. I mean, I almost kind of overreacted on Minnesota. I think I had them ranked like like 13th or 14th in my rankings heading into the Purdue game because I thought Minnesota was, and rightfully so. The way that they looked in those first 4 weeks, it was nothing short of impressive, but they've disappointed the past couple of weeks. And so this is a crucial game here for Minnesota. If you lose this game, if you're Minnesota, you're 1-3 in conference. That's what that means. And so basically that puts you on your last string. With 3 losses in conference, it's pretty tough to win a division, even though it's possible in the West this season, that's for sure. But for Penn State, they lost to Michigan 17-41, beat Northwestern 17-7, beat Central Michigan 33-14. Of course, the Northwestern Central Michigan wins were, they were a bit closer, but of course the Northwestern game had its own circumstances. Beat Auburn on the road 41-12, really impressive win there, and they also beat Ohio 46-10. Your key points for this one: Minnesota 4-2, and once again, since starting 4-0, this team has lost 2 straight. They have disappointed a little bit, but of course the Purdue game, they didn't have Ibrahim, so they couldn't get anything going on offense. And against Illinois, they just simply got beat and dealt with a couple of injuries. But I will say this though, for this matchup, the status of Tanner Morgan and Mo Ibrahim is going to be crucial here. Ibrahim, it looks like he's going to be playing. I would assume he's going to be playing. Tanner Morgan is a bit more of a question mark heading into this matchup, as once again he got carted off apparently during that Illinois game. So that is something to keep in mind there. If Minnesota does not have Tanner Morgan, it's going to be much tougher for this team to win the game, even though I feel like Ibrahim has a much higher impact on this offense. But for Penn State, this team is still an excellent team despite a loss last week. I still feel like Penn State is a team not to underestimate at this point in the season. We're halfway through this season, but there's still a lot more football to be played, that's for sure. They're a strong defensive team, and offensively they got potential for sure. It's just a matter of whether or not we can see them. Defensively they're allowing 19 points a game, which isn't bad, but offensively 31 on average, which could be better. But they also have the home field advantage, which is a huge factor in this match. I will say that. You got Penn State, which is already a tough environment, and when you have to play them at night, that is, especially in a primetime game where a lot of people are going to be watching this one. That's going to be crucial, I think, for Penn State in this matchup. But that said, let's get to the prediction here for Minnesota and Penn State coming up here in Week 8. For this one, got to go with Penn State here. 28-24 is my predicted final score. And I see this being a pretty low to moderate scoring Big Ten matchup here. I think Penn State gets the win, but it's going to be back and forth, close game. Probably one of the better games, actually, I see coming up here in Week 8. And this is based on Tanner Morgan and if he does play. If he does play for this matchup, I still think Penn State wins. If he doesn't play, I feel like Minnesota's got even less of a chance of winning this one. But I think Penn State in the end, 20-24 is my predicted final score. I just see this offense finding a way against Minnesota. And I still think Minnesota's really got a chance here. That's why it's just a tough one to predict here, because you got Minnesota, who has shown promise at many points this season. It's just the past couple of games they just haven't looked quite as good, and this is a huge opportunity for Minnesota to get back on the right track. We see that they've played decent on the road. Of course they just lost to Illinois last week, but that Michigan State game they just blew out Sparty. So it's possible that Minnesota goes in and gets a huge win here. But I feel like in the end, Penn State night game, going to go with the Nittany Lions here, 55%, over under 44.5. I'll take the over for this one, and Minnesota cover the spread in the end. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.